And I'm back, and this is my 2001 Volvo V70, and the temperature's dropped. We've got some snow on the ground, and there's a problem with the car, and it's something that you may not expect it to be. And I'm going to reveal what that is a little later in the video, but I'm going to try and start the car, and you're going to see what the problem is here. Okay, so normally this thing starts right up. Okay, when the temperature is warm, this thing starts right up. Now watch how hard this is going to be to start. See that? Kicks. Hear the fuel pump running. And it doesn't want to go. See that? And it will start eventually, but I don't want to force it, but it'll take quite a few times to get it to go. Okay, so the other thing you might want to know about is just a little code reader. You can get these anywhere. They're about $20, $25, and you can read whatever code has been set, like when your check engine light comes on the dash of your car. You can plug this into what they call the OBD2 port, which is the onboard diagnostic port. It's usually down here under the dash, and then just turn your key to the on position, and this will come on, and then you'll get to a point where you can read the code, and it'll tell you what it is, and then you can erase the code. And usually what people do is they'll find out the code here, and then they'll go online and research that and find out what it means. And there was a code on my car here whenever this was acting up, and that code I'll put on the screen right here. And I went and looked it up, and it said coolant temperature sensor. That makes sense. You know, if one of those sensors isn't working like it should, you're not going to get the correct fuel air mixture for a cold start going to the engine, and that resulted in that really hard start. Okay, a temperature sender is a thermistor. A thermistor decreases in resistance through it as the temperature increases, and it also does the opposite. It increases in resistance as the temperature decreases. So when the resistance goes down, as the temperature increases, the resistance climbs as the temperature decreases. And I can show you that here. Here's a new one. Okay, a probe. There's a thermistor inside of here, and it's got two connections out here. So we're just going to go on the resistance setting, the ohm setting on here. All right, and this is just out in the air. So we're going to see if we can get a reading across here. Let's see here. Okay, so with this just hanging in free air, we're getting 2.82 thousand ohms. Okay, so 2.82 kilo ohms. Okay, 2.83. So it's going to level out there somewhere. All right, now watch what happens when I hold that probe in my hand. Let's warm that up. See it falling? So all I'm doing is I'm warming up that probe, and it's the resistance is decreasing as the temperature increases. Okay, and that's how they work. Okay, so on a small engine, everyone's familiar with a manual choke. So what we do when the engine's cold, we close the choke, and what it does is it reduces the amount of air that's allowed in here, and that increases the amount of fuel that's going to be introduced to the engine on a cold start. So that helps with the start. With a cold start, you get more fuel and less air. So you get more fuel going into the engine on a cold start when the choke is closed, and once the engine warms up a little bit and you open the choke, then you get less fuel going in. And so the engine runs more efficiently, but you're not really worried about efficiency when you want it started. You want to start it quickly and you want it to run smooth when it's cold, so you run it quite rich. And so basically the electronics on a modern car operate the same as a choke. Even though there's no choke butterfly in the intake stream, it does this another way. Okay, so it's critical that all the sensors on the engine work in harmony with each other, and if any one of them's out of whack, then it'll disturb how the engine runs. It may not even run at all sometimes, but I'll just walk you through on this very brief sketch here. Okay, just take a look at this very oversimplified drawing of an engine and the sensors. Okay, so let's just start at the air intake. So you get your air filter, and the air coming in passes through a mass airflow sensor. That lets the electronic control module, or the electronic control unit, which is the computer, it lets it know just exactly how much air is coming into the engine through the pipe on the way into the engine here. There's another sensor there called the intake air temperature sensor, and that's self-explanatory. It wants to know what temperature the air is so it can compensate with the amount of fuel that it injects. Okay, over here at the injectors. There's the coolant temperature sensor, what we're looking at today. Okay, so you have an idle air control solenoid. It's not really a sensor, but it works in conjunction with the throttle position sensor to allow more or less air into the system, especially at idle. Okay. Then you have knock sensors. So if the engine's knocking and vibrating in a certain way when it's starting to run or when it's running, that could be from pre-detonation of the fuel and things like that. That'll send a signal back to here to adjust the fuel air mixture and to usually light up the trouble light on the dash. You have the manifold absolute pressure sensor that detects the either pressure or vacuum in the intake manifold, and that all goes into the computer again to help determine the fuel air mixture. You have an oxygen sensor in the outlet pipe. You'll usually have one before and after the catalytic converter, and this is to let the computer know how efficiently the fuel combustion is in the engine. You'll also have a camshaft position sensor and a crankshaft position sensor, and it lets the computer know if the engine's in the right spot for the fuel injection to occur to explode the fuel. Okay, that's an overview of the sensors. Now, if any one of those is out of whack, or if it's not reading correctly, it'll send a trouble code, and that's what we've got on this case. We've got a trouble code, and I'll tell you what that is. I'll put that on the screen here in a second. And I checked it, and it came up as coolant temperature sensor. Now, most people would say, well, coolant temperature sensor is just going to be the gauge on the dash. It's going to show that it's either cool or warm or at an operating temperature, and that's all it is, right? But that signal is very similar to the intake air temperature sensor. It tells the computer what temperature the engine block is and the water in it, so that it can adjust the fuel air mixture. So basically we're looking at the same thing again. In a small engine, for example, when you close the choke, the fuel mixture going in to start a cold engine is rich. But if you don't have the choke turned on, you have a hard time pulling and starting that little engine. That engine was hard to start. You saw when I tried to start it here a minute ago. And the reason is the coolant temperature sensor is faulty, and it is giving a sensor signal to the computer that the engine is probably warm when it's cold. So what's happening is less fuel is going to be injected because it thinks the engine's already warm, instead of what it is. It's below zero, and what you should be giving the engine is a lot more fuel on that cold start. So if this was reading properly, this would send a signal back to the computer that the engine is ice cold, and we've got to increase the amount of fuel injected on that cold start. Okay, let's get that sensor changed. Okay, just put a pan under here in case there's any spillage. Now, I was hoping to get at that sensor without having to take this hose off, but I'm going to have to take it off. So I'm just going to take it off, and I don't think there's much, we're pretty high in the engine here. There might be a little fluid leak out, but I think if I just take this hose off, I'll be able to get at that sensor right there. Okay, I'm going to hold the hose up too. Like that. There. So I'm gonna have to take this cover off, and I'm gonna have to take off the thermostat housing cover right here. Okay, so those 2 bolts out of there, the 2 clips. I'm gonna lift this cover off. Now we can get at this other bolt in here. We can get at these 2 bolts here. Okay. Okay. Just out of that housing. Okay. Okay, so I've got some pipe dope with PTFE, and I'm going to put a little bit of that on the threads. Okay, now we've got that one ready to go in, and this one's loose. Okay, so out comes this one. Finger over that. And here's the new one. And in it goes. And there it goes. Okay. All right, that's snug. Off any excess. Okay, so that housing came up with the thermostat, and it's got a rubber gasket, so that's okay. Everything looks good there. So we'll just put that back down. All right. And we'll get that tightened down. Snug. Okay, that's good. Got our hose here. The fluid's still showing in it. All right, put that on there. Okay. Bring that together. Plug it in. Little pins will go back into these holes here. There it is. Okay, so we just got to snug these guys down. Okay, that's all back together. We only lost maybe a half a cup of coolant, and we'll keep an eye on the reservoir after the car's been started and run a while. But next to nothing came out in the pan here. Okay, let's go and try and start the car and see if it starts any better. It's just above freezing, so let's see if that made any difference. It started right up, right away. No hesitation, no long starts, just right away, immediately. So that was our problem. And what we're going to do before we close the video is we're going to go over and we're going to test the old sensor and see what its readings were. Okay, so we're back in at the bench. There's the old one here, and let's test that and see what that comes up as. All right. Let's get the probes in here. Getting nothing so far. Let's see here. There's got to be something happening in there. I'm getting nothing at all. I have OL, open line. So it's showing no continuity through there at all. So there's an open in this somewhere. The and that would have resulted in the engine thinking that the coolant was warm instead of ice cold, and not putting enough fuel in that initial start to give it a richer start, as if it had a choke on it, right? So anyway, hopefully that helps somebody. That's an unusual problem. You know, you'd think when you have a hard start, you think, well, it's got to be fuel, it's got to be spark, it's got to be something like that, but you're not going to think it's the coolant temperature sensor, are you? I didn't anyway. But anyway, hopefully that helps somebody. Thanks for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you again here very soon on Everyday Projects. Bye for now.